the second time I run the country in the world because, it's the world. I'm trying to save.
We all know in a stormy global economy, the single market is our safe harbor.
For ages, the bigwigs pushed this idea of everyone holding hands, trading freely, all managed by groups like the UN and the WTO, Global Village, Happy Families, all that jazz. Sounds nice on paper. But then you get someone like Donald Trump who looks at the whole setup and basically says, nah, America's getting screwed. He's the guy ready to throw a wrench in the works. And his favorite wrench is tariffs. Big taxes on stuff coming into the country. And when he even talks about doing it, the folks running the Global show freak out. They really, really hate it. Let's dig into why he wants to do it and why they're clutching their pearls. Maybe they've got a point, maybe they're missing something big. Trump's angle is pretty straightforward. He thinks America played nice for too long. Funded the parties, guarded the door, let everyone sell their stuff, cheapen the US market, while other places, especially China, played by different rules. He sees factories closing down in the US, jobs vanishing overseas, and American companies getting their ideas ripped off left and right. That big trade gap everyone talks about, to him, that's just cash flowing straight out of American pockets into someone else's. And let's be clear, this wasn't just a feeling, they had receipts. You had Chinese state-backed companies churning out steel and solar panels like there was no tomorrow, drowning the global market and gutting American factories, all thanks to endless cash infusions from Beijing. That wasn't competition, it was economic warfare subsidized by communists. Then there was their grand Made in China 2025 blueprint, a flashing red light showing they weren't just trying to make better toys, they were hell-bent on dominating everything high-tech, robotics, AI, electric vehicles, aerospace. And how are they going to get there? Think about that. Build a factory here, but first, give us your blueprints. What a deal. On top of that, years of monkeying with their currency value made their stuff artificially cheap and American goods way too expensive over there. And forget trying to sell American beef or access their cloud computing market. You'd hit a great wall of hidden regulations, bogus inspections, and outright protectionism designed specifically to keep outsiders out. It wasn't a level playing field. It was a rigged casino where America kept putting chips down and China kept raking them in.
We're run by stupid people, and we have to change it, or we're not going to have a country left.
So when the UN talks about working together, Trump hears America pays the bill. Tariffs are his way of saying enough. It's about putting America first, even if it means breaking some eggs. Forget the fancy diplomacy. This is about muscle. The main idea is simple. If you want to sell your stuff here, you play fair. If you don't, it's going to cost you. Tariffs are the punishment, the wake-up call.
Is what are the import competitors going to do?
Yeah.
Are they going to build 10 factories? Are they going to take pricing and pass it on to the customers this summer?
It's like walking into a negotiation you think is rigged and just flipping the table over. Gets everyone's attention, right? China's obviously target number one. Trump, and plenty of others actually, think China's been cheating the system for years, propping up their companies, messing with their money, demanding US tech secrets, blocking American companies out. Tariffs are the crowbar to try and force them open and make them play straighter. It's basically an economic street fight. Trump didn't just wing it, he had specific clubs in his bag. First came the Section 232 hammer, smashing down tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from practically everywhere, including buddies like Canada and the EU. The excuse? National security. Sounded flimsy maybe, but it got everyone's attention. Fast. Then he unleashed the Section 301 bazooka, aimed squarely at China after his trade reps put together a massive list of grievances about IP theft and forced tech transfers. Suddenly, hundreds of billions worth of Chinese goods, from circuit boards to sneakers, faced hefty taxes. Washington rolled out these lists, sometimes with barely any notice, leaving businesses gasping and supply chains in knots. And this tariff trigger wasn't just for China. Remember the threats to slap huge tariffs on German cars, BMWs, Mercedes, again citing national security, or threatening France with taxes on wine and cheese because they dared to impose a digital tax on big tech. Tariffs became his universal tool, the diplomatic equivalent of a 2x4. He even used the threat to bully Canada and Mexico back to the table to tear up NAFTA and hammer out the USMCA deal, squeezing concessions they'd resisted for years,
They're anywhere between, like Goldman Sachs had said, there could be 60 million jobs that are affected in the export sector.
But it's not just China. Even America's friends aren't always safe. He's waved the tariff threat at Europe, Canada, Mexico. Why? Maybe he thinks they aren't paying enough for defense with NATO. Maybe he wants them to buy more American farm goods. Whatever the reason, threatening everyone means everyone has to come talk to him to get out of the line of fire. Pretty blunt.
All you do is threaten, intimidate, lie, and so on, which is, in fact, as I said earlier, quite common in negotiations.
And yeah, part of it is trying to bully companies into making stuff back in the USA again. Make imports expensive, maybe building things at home starts to look cheaper. That promise, bringing jobs back, plays great with his voters. Plus, there's the whole don't rely on your enemies angle. Makes sense. You don't want China making all your medicines or computer chips, right? Tariffs could push companies to make that critical stuff closer to home, even if it costs more. Security over price tag. He's basically betting that everyone needs American shoppers more than America needs their cheap stuff, and they'll cave first. Risky bet. Now, why do the UN folks, the WTO suits, and leaders around the world lose their minds over this? They see Trump's tariff plan as lighting a match near a global powder keg. First off, they scream about the rules. There's a whole system, the WTO, set up to handle trade fights. Trump just ignores it and does what he wants. They worry it'll wreck the system and turn global trade into a free-for-all, like back in the bad old days before World War II. You're supposed to talk it out, not just start punching.
So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%.
Then there's the money. The experts warn tariffs mess everything up. Supply chains get tangled, companies pay more for parts, even American companies, and guess who pays in the end? Regular people, buying groceries or cars. Prices go up. They worry it could slow down the whole world economy, maybe even cause a recession. Not exactly a vote winner when your stuff costs more. See, for the globalist crowd, the WTO wasn't just some building in Geneva. It was the sacred temple of managed trade. It had rules, committees, and crucially, a court, the appellate body, where countries could duke it out legally. Trump didn't just ignore the rulings. He took a sledgehammer to the court itself by blocking new judges, basically grinding the whole dispute system to a halt. To the establishment, this was pure anarchy, risking a return to the trade chaos of the 1930s. Beyond the broken rules, they pointed to the immediate mess. It wasn't just theory, it hit bottom lines hard. And the retaliation wasn't just symbolic, it hit specific nerve points. Maine lobster fishermen suddenly locked out of China, specialty chemical plants in Louisiana seeing European orders vanish. Diplomatically, it was a train wreck. G7 summits turned into awkward family dinners. Allies like Germany and France started openly criticizing the US president, and everyone began asking if America was still a reliable partner or just a rogue elephant trampling the garden. And what happens when you hit someone? They usually hit back. Tariffs mean retaliation. Other countries slap taxes on American stuff. Farm goods, motorcycles, whiskey, you name it. So while one factory might be protected, farmers or factory workers making stuff for export get hammered. Hello, trade war. Nobody really wins those. Plus,
that China will be raising retaliatory tariffs on U.S. imports to 125%.
Slapping tariffs on your allies, countries you need for other things, like defense or fighting terrorism, doesn't exactly make for good team spirit. They start wondering if America is a reliable partner or just out for itself. Weakens trust, makes everything harder. So, the global view is that Trump's playing a dangerous game, short-term toughness that could cause long-term global pain, hurting America just as much as anyone else. Protectionism, they call it, and they think it's poison. But hold on, is that the whole story? Trump's crowd says the critics just don't get it, or maybe they like the old system just fine. Thank you very much. Their big point, the old system was rigged, especially with China. Years of talking nicely at the WTO did zip. Maybe only a shock, like tariffs, could actually force real change. You gotta break something to fix it, right?
This is a style in which the President Trump does not want to govern like President Roosevelt.
And remember all the screaming about economic disaster last time he did tariffs? It wasn't pretty for everyone, sure, but the whole US economy didn't exactly implode like some predicted. Maybe things aren't as fragile as the experts claim, or maybe the pain is worth it for some bigger goal. That bigger goal includes national security. The critics talk about cheap goods, Trump talks about not depending on China for medicine if another pandemic hits. Makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe cheap isn't always best, especially when a global pandemic hits and suddenly nobody can get enough masks, ventilators, or even basic antibiotic ingredients because, surprise, the entire supply chain runs through China. Trump's people pointed to that horror show and basically said, "See? Told you so." Relying on your biggest strategic competitor for life-saving medical gear or the rare earth minerals needed for fighter jets and iPhones started looking less like smart economics and more like strategic insanity. Maybe paying a bit more to actually make critical stuff closer to home wasn't such a crazy idea after all. And let's face it, while the folks sipping champagne in Manhattan or Silicon Valley were getting rich off global trade, millions in the Rust Belt or the rural South felt like they got screwed. They saw factories close, jobs vanish overseas, and communities decay. For them, Trump's tariffs weren't some abstract economic theory. They were the first time in decades a president seemed to be fighting for their side against the elites who'd sold them out for cheaper shipping costs. It wasn't just policy, it felt personal. And let's be real, a lot of people felt ignored by that whole global trade thing. They saw factories close while guys in suits got rich. Trump talks directly to them. His tariffs, blunt as they are, feel like someone's finally fighting for their side against the global elite. Then you have Trump, saying the system was already broken for America. He sees tariffs as the tough medicine needed to fix it, protect jobs, bring back industries, and make America strong again. He thinks their fear just proves he's hitting a nerve. Trump with his tariff sledgehammer and the globalist UN/WTO crowd having a collective meltdown. You'd think after the first round of tariffs, the dust might have settled. Maybe everyone learned to live with a bit of America first grit in the global economic oyster. But oh no, buckle up. Because the latest dispatches from the trade wars show that this particular saga is far from over. In fact, it seems like Trump's just found the second act for his Tariff Man show, and the UN types are reaching for even stronger smelling salts. Let's get right into the fresh meat of it. The ink was barely dry on the old tariff lists when Trump decided to basically tell the world, "You thought that was something? Hold my Diet Coke." We're talking about the spring of 2025, a period that'll probably have its own wing in the Economic History Museum right next to the Dutch tulip mania and the 1929 crash, if you listen to the global hand-wringers. Trump, it seems, wasn't just content with targeted strikes on Chinese goods or waving the tariff stick at European cars. Nah, he went bigger. He declared a national emergency over foreign trade practices. Let that sink in. Not a war, not a plague, but trade practices warranting emergency powers. This allowed him to slap a baseline 10% reciprocal tariff on pretty much everyone. The idea, as peddled by his team, was simple fairness. You tax our stuff, we tax your stuff at the same rate. Sounds almost childishly simple, right? Like playground rules. You hit me, I hit you back just as hard. Of course, the folks in Geneva and the UN Plaza in New York didn't see it as simple playground justice. To them, this was like Trump walking into their carefully curated global library where every book read trade rule, was in its meticulously ordered place, and starting a bonfire with the card catalog. The WTO, their temple of trade, was built on the idea of most favored nation. You give one country a good deal, you give it to everyone. It's about complex negotiations, give and take, and let's be honest, a lot of bureaucracy. Trump's reciprocal idea just bypasses all that. It's a unilateral, my way or the highway approach that has the global rule keepers seeing red. They're screaming that this isn't just bending the rules anymore, it's shredding the entire rulebook and rewriting it with a Sharpie. The phrase, most significant U.S. protectionist trade action since the 1930s, started getting thrown around. And you know, when they invoke the 1930s, they're trying to scare your pants off with visions of another Great Depression.
We have learned from that failure. The Federal Reserve will not fail in the same way again. This time it will fail in a different way.
And the reciprocal part wasn't even the whole story. On top of the baseline, 10%, there was the threat of even higher individualized tariffs for countries that the U.S. had big trade deficits with. China naturally was still public enemy number one. Their tariff rate, when you added up all the different layers, the reciprocal bit, the existing Section 301s, maybe a sprinkle of national security tariffs for good measure, was reportedly heading towards a staggering 145% or more on some goods. Imagine being a Chinese exporter trying to figure that out. One day you're selling widgets to Walmart, the next your widgets cost more than a small car. Now, Trump being Trump, there was always a bit of a theatrical pause, a bit of will he or won't he? He dangled a 90-day reprieve on the full force of these reciprocal tariffs for countries that didn't immediately retaliate. So for a moment, many got a slight breather, facing only the 10% flat tax. Even the EU's Ursula von der Leyen, who's usually got choice words for Trump's trade tactics, had to grit her teeth and call it a step towards stabilizing the global economy, probably while her aides were frantically trying to figure out what it all meant for European businesses. Bangladesh, of all places, got a specific shout out for a temporary reprieve after their leader apparently made a direct appeal. It's like a global game of Mother May I, with Trump as the ultimate decision maker on who gets to take a step forward and who gets sent back. This constant uncertainty is, of course, part of why the UN and WTO crowd hate it. Their whole system is built on predictability, on businesses being able to make long-term plans based on stable trade rules. Trump's approach is more like a series of economic flash mobs, tariffs appearing here, disappearing there, morphing into new forms. It keeps everyone guessing, and for the global bureaucrats, that's a nightmare. They want calm seas and predictable currents. Trump's navigating by gut, creating his own weather systems. And it wasn't just the broad strokes. He kept adding new items to his tariff hit list. Remember the concerns about critical minerals? Well, come April 2025, an executive order kicked off a deep dive into whether America's reliance on foreign-sourced critical minerals was a national security threat. Translation: get ready for potential tariffs on everything from the guts of your smartphone to the components in a fighter jet if they're not dug up or processed on American soil or by very friendly hands. Steel and aluminum tariffs, the old favorites, got a tune-up to close loopholes. The car industry, perpetually in the tariff spotlight, saw a complex new dance. A 25% tariff on imported cars and key parts stayed, but with new rules to stop other tariffs, like on steel and aluminum in those parts, from piling on top if the car was mostly made in North America under USMCA rules. They even dangled the idea of reimbursements for tariffs on imported parts if the final assembly happened in the USA. It's a maze designed to incentivize companies to bring production, or at least final assembly, back to the US. Then just when you thought it couldn't get weirder, in May 2025, Trump takes aim at Hollywood? Well, foreign Hollywood. He greenlit a process to potentially slap a 100% tariff on foreign-made films imported into the US. The justification? Foreign countries were supposedly luring American filmmakers away with incentives. So if you're a British or Australian filmmaker hoping for a US release, suddenly your movie might cost double. The UK, Australia, and New Zealand, not exactly economic foes, were immediately up in arms. It shows that for Trump, the tariff isn't just an economic tool. It's a multi-purpose cudgel he's willing to swing at almost anything he sees as unfair to American interests, no matter how unconventional the target.
The movie industry in America is dying a very fast death.
The UN's specialized agencies, particularly the WTO, are practically hoarse from shouting warnings. The WTO's forecasts for 2025 started looking grim. In global merchandise trade, they pointed fingers directly at rising trade tensions, the shadow of US reciprocal tariffs, and the sheer policy uncertainty. They're talking about North American exports taking a nosedive. This isn't just academic talk. This is about actual ships carrying fewer goods, factories slowing down, and jobs potentially being lost, not just in the US or China, but globally. The Center for Economic Policy Research chimed in with stark predictions. The 2025 US tariff storm could shrink global trade significantly, hammer US and Chinese GDP, and fundamentally re-scramble global supply chains, making everything less efficient and more murky. That murky part is key. The UN and WTO strive for transparency. These new tariff regimes are often complex and subject to sudden changes, making it hard for anyone to see clearly. And what about the retaliation the experts always warn about? It's happening. China, of course, didn't just say, "Thank you, sir, may I have another?" They hit back with their own tariffs. Canada, America's usually polite northern neighbor, has also shown it's willing to retaliate. This tit for tat is exactly what the UN system was designed to prevent. They wanted countries to bring their grievances to the WTO court to talk it out, to find a mediated solution. Instead, it's becoming an economic bar fight, with countries deciding to be their own judge, jury, and enforcer. Trade lawyers are pointing out that this whole cycle of unilateral tariffs and immediate retaliation is happening outside the WTO's rulebook, basically turning it into a bystander in its own arena. The economic pain at home is also a hot topic, though Trump's base often sees it as a necessary price for a bigger cause. But the numbers from various think tanks are pretty eye-watering. Depending on who you ask, these new rounds of tariffs could cost the average American household anywhere from an extra $1,200 to nearly $5,000 a year. That's not chump change. That's your grocery bill going up, your new washing machine costing more, your kids' sneakers getting pricier. The Yale Budget Lab crunched the numbers and suggested US GDP growth could take a hit and inflation could spike. For the UN types, this is Exhibit A for why tariffs are bad. They hurt the very people they claim to protect, and they risk broader economic slowdown. They'd argue that a stable, open global economy lifts more boats, even if some boats get bigger, faster than others. But Team Trump and their supporters would fire back. What about the hollowing out of American manufacturing for decades? What about the jobs shipped overseas? What about China playing by its own set of rules, stealing intellectual property and subsidizing its industries to undercut everyone else? For them, the pain of tariffs is a corrective measure, a way to rebalance a system that was already broken for the American worker. The national security argument is potent too. The focus on critical minerals, for example, resonates with anyone worried about America being dependent on potentially hostile nations for stuff that's essential for defense or high-tech industries. The pandemic already gave everyone a brutal lesson in what happens when your entire supply chain for vital goods like medical supplies runs through one or two foreign countries. Trump's message is, better to pay a bit more and make it here or at least nearby than be caught with our pants down when a crisis hits. So the global institutions, with the UN at their symbolic head, are aghast because they see decades of work towards a more integrated, rules-based global economy being upended by one leader's disruptive agenda. They see rising chaos, economic damage, and the weakening of international cooperation. They genuinely believe that this path leads to a poorer, more unstable world for everyone. Trump, on the other hand, and those who back his play, see a necessary rebellion against a complacent and often hypocritical global elite that rigged the game against American interests. They see a fight for sovereignty, for national renewal, and for a rebalancing of global power. They believe that the old system wasn't working for ordinary Americans, and that the pearl clutching from the international bodies is just the sound of vested interests being challenged. This isn't just a debate about a few percentage points on import duties anymore. It's a fundamental clash of visions for how the world should work. And with every new tariff announcement, every retaliatory measure, and every dire warning from the UN or WTO, the stakes just get higher. The global village is looking more like a global standoff, and nobody seems to have a clear map for how to get back to friendlier territory, or if that's even the goal anymore for one of its most powerful residents. The show, it seems, must go on. Is it a smart, tough strategy to reset the rules for America's benefit? A necessary jolt to a system that wasn't fair? Was Trump's tariff game smart power play, or a wild, risky move that could burn everyone? Let us know in the comments. Smash that like and subscribe for more.